I'd say 5% of the average person knows what an omnibus bill is. A bill that's so
everything under the
large that there's like a theme around the bill. Like Biden lied to us with a stupid anti-inflation bill.
Yep.
It was not about fighting inflation. There was so much tucked into it. I mean, sometimes these bills are 1,000 pages, 700 pages, 64 pages, that even Congress themselves, they will tell you, I didn't read the whole thing.
Of course not.
And do people realize that Congress votes on bills they don't even read? That's part of also a hypocrisy of Congress, that they're fighting for the people that they say they're representing.
Yeah.
That's a whole different problem that's why I think this country, it's doomed, because electoral college, I mean, I have issues with that. Mob rule, democracy, omnibus bills, gerrymandering, the census, perpetual politicians. I mean, all this stuff. It's the Supreme Court now actually becoming an instrument to create policy instead of being an interpretive body.
Yeah.
All of this stuff, man. But the biggest problem, we the people are not paying attention and are not holding these fat donut eaters accountable. It's our fault. That's why we're doomed. We're going to be a socialist country, and I think we'll ultimately be taken over by China. Welcome to another installment of Inside Reality. It's a weekly podcast where we dare to take on obvious topics that most people just kind of float around and don't have the guts to really dissect. And we tear these topics apart, and we try to apply critical thinking, dialectic thinking, and conviction to these topics. This is my partner, Jimmy Tran. He produces the show. Please like, share, unlike, do whatever the hell you want. But we are challenging people to think about obvious topics. And today, we're going to talk about the hypocrisy, the duplicity, the palpable, self-evident obviousness of duplicity and hypocrisy in politics. I don't care what party you're talking about. I don't care at what level. Most of these fat, disgusting donut eaters are phony, man. They're phony as hell, and they manipulate you and me and the rest of us. The problem is most of us aren't paying attention. We drink the frickin' Kool-Aid, and we become indoctrinated like the frickin' Manchurian Candidate and follow these dumbbells. And they're all, to me, a bunch of fat, donut-eating, disgusting, nonsensical quasi-leaders. The hypocrisy of politics.
That was actually a great opening there, Jeffrey.
Welcome.
I heard the word hypocrisy at least 6 times.
Well, I use the word duplicity interchangeably.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy.
But anyway,
but let's talk about
let's talk about that.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about the gerrymandering, okay?
Well, before we do, let's put a little frame on this, okay? I think it's important. So the first question I would have is that if being politician is this way, or how you get to become a politician is by being this way, then we're doomed, right? Isn't that? I mean, it feels that's the case, right?
I think we're doomed. Irrespective of the hypocrisy of the fat donut-eating politician, I think the country's doomed because I've already said this in a previous podcast. More than half the country continues to not produce, but take, TAKE, and the rest of us produce. I, for one, retired, and I quit producing because I didn't want to subsidize half of these, half of the population that doesn't want to do anything. So we're doomed from a economic incentivification, innovation, entrepreneurship perspective, if you want to call doomed from those dynamic points of view. But we're also doomed because most people don't even question the political party that they're aligned with or the stupid leaders that claim to officially represent, that party, whether it's the Republican or the Democratic Party. Most people don't question their leaders, and it's so pathetic. And it's striking to me when you hear an interview, right? Because the interview wants the audience with that individual, whether the interviewer wants Trump or Pelosi or Schumer or the fat governor from Illinois or that Dracula character from California. Have you ever noticed he's the apotheosis of Count Dracula, right before he bites the big-breasted girl in the bed. Have you ever noticed that? With those eyes? What's his name? Gavin Newsom? But anyway,
Newsom, yeah.
If somebody wants an audience with Gavin Newsom, that's a get. That's a get, right? Quote unquote, that's a get for the interviewer. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that almost notwithstanding the interviewer, whether it's that idiot Laura Ingraham or Hannity, who's pathetic, or any of those guys, they're asking someone to come on their show and they don't challenge the person they're interviewing. I know that's a sweeping statement, but that's part of the problem is the interviewer hardly ever challenges the person they're interviewing because they want to be in their good graces to continue to get them back on the show and to be their little friend. You know what I mean? It's so disgusting. I mean, 60 Minutes does it all the time.
Yeah.
They don't ever challenge the people that they're promulgating that relate to a topic on their show, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of where the hypocrisy and the duplicity, where it genders itself and where it has a life of its own, because the interviewers don't challenge the people that are interviewing.
Well, I think that there's another element to it too, and there's some historical element to it, meaning that we came from a world where it was fairly top down in terms of the information, right? I mean, so TV, radio, I mean, whatever the networks, because they were in control of this information, they were in control of this, the image and so forth. And so shifting that into a medium like the internet with the podcast and stuff like that, obviously we're seeing things more from the bottom up. I mean, anybody can start. I mean, we started this podcast, just being able to do that on YouTube, and anybody, can find us on YouTube, and we'll be on other platforms as well soon. But the point is that I think that is one of the elements, because what we're seeing is basically the packaging that goes into it. Because if you've ever worked in TV and radio, so forth, right? I mean, the whole presentation. Yeah, I know you have. I'm speaking to the audience.
I thought you meant you, like they were talking to.
No, the proverbial you. But yeah, I know you have.
You.
Right? I mean, so everything has to be a certain way because that's the image. You got to carry that image. You got to protect that image, and that's almost at all costs. Right? So that's part of it. Now, of course, we all do that at some level, right? Which is why it's hard for people to say publicly what they mean.
I'm not sure how you're saying what you're saying. This is Inside Reality, by the way. I'm Jeffrey. This is Jimmy. So what we were talking about is the hypocrisy of politics. Yeah. So how does command of a medium like ABC, NBC, CBS, back when they were the dominant network, institutionalized broadcast mediums, how does commanding that monopoly have to do with the hypocrisy of politics? Because
they are part of the hypocrisy, right? So here's an example. Now, in some cases, it was necessary, right? But here's an example, okay? FDR, okay? I think he was crippled by polio.
Yeah.
I think it was. And then he was in a
never
wheelchair.
Filmed in a wheelchair.
Exactly. Even though television just emerged, because he was mostly radio at the time, but television gained traction.
Yeah, right.
But they could not not show him, because that was weakness, right? So when you're coming from a paradigm in terms of, you got to think about that world stage here, right? I mean, you got the individual, and then you got the people, and then you got the world, right? And so on a stage like that, I mean, because if you think about it, weakness when you're a leader means that you are going to be eaten alive.
Well, look at Biden. He was palpably, manipulated, self-evidently weak. He couldn't even climb stairs, falling asleep, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And now his presidency, you couldn't hide the obviousness of it.
Yes, but that's because the obvious was so overwhelming, right? But with the case, like I said, with the FDR scenario, it wasn't so evident. And so he was able to, by putting the camera in the right angle, by propping him up so forth.
So you're saying that the networks actually tended to be liberal and still are, and FDR was liberal. So they were almost protecting the image of his strength by not revealing the fact that he was in a wheelchair, which would have demonstrated a certain weakness. You know, Kennedy was also protected because he had Addison's disease and wore a brace. And there were often times where Kennedy was stumbling and fumbling. And I'm not being critical of the disease, but he had Addison's disease and he had, back issues because he was a war hero running the PT boat in 41, 42 and the Solomon Islands. Nonetheless, he was also protected to some degree.
Yeah. But it's not just a liberal. I mean, my point is that this is actually part and parcel to the whole mechanism, right? But we're downstream so far from it that today our experience is a little different. Like I said, because we do have bottom up information, meaning that literally something happened in your home today could be world news literally within the same day. Even with just this mechanism that we have right now called live streaming.
I think it would garner something to that extreme, could garner quote unquote world news. But the problem though is populations are so fragmented that when the moon landing happened in July, here you go, my
69.
friend, the Saturn rocket, that was July 21st or something, 20th, 1969, like 1 billion people watched the moon landing.
Yeah.
And at that time, there were like 3 billion people on planet Earth.
Sure.
1 out of 3 people on planet Earth saw that landing. Okay.
Yeah.
That could not happen today because there were so many different populations watching or garnering their news or attending to this thing that it would be difficult to capture a world event with a ubiquitous population as we did like in the 60s, 70s, even maybe up to the 80s.
But you're probably right. Although when the Queen died, and I think Queen Elizabeth II, when she passed away I think 2-3 years ago, that was a big deal. Now, of course, the enormity of the British Empire was huge. I mean, so there was a lot of that, because even the state broadcasts and stuff carry that, but so did everyone, because there definitely prominence there. And I think that not the last pope, but I think 2 popes ago or something like that, when he passed away, there was a lot of billions of people. Now, of course, 1 out of 3 billion is a higher percentage, right? Because today you get 1 billion people, and out of 8 is only 1/8. It's not as So to your point, you're correct.
That means 7 billion people are not paying or not watching the same thing in real time at the same time. That's what I'm talking about. So
at the same time, though, that's important
to monopolize a medium where you're broadcasting information and messaging. It's a lot more difficult to capture large swaths of people today than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago.
But you're not taking into account time dilation, meaning that with TV and radio in the old days, you had to be there. So it was an appointment moment. If you missed that moment, you're gone. There's no way to get back, right? And then when the VHS and recorder came in, now you got to see reruns and so forth. Today, of course,
I think we're moving away from
we are moving a little bit, but I think that they're all connected in the sense that because you can lie over a broader time period, right? Because literally, if you're on TV, on a radio back in those days, you can lie once and then that's it. Even in the newspaper, it takes months before that lie really reached anywhere that was significant, right? So if you look at the political system, the way I'm kind of evaluating this, right, you see that from a historical standpoint, the politician can conduct themselves in that manner. They can lie, they can cheat, and nobody would notice, nobody could care, and nobody would even know or recognize that was a lie until it was too late, right? Those unintended consequences has to literally show up before their lies are visible. Whereas today, that's not the case, because with the internet and the fastness of, there's even talk about
I don't know that I agree with that, because the people that hate Trump, I voted for Trump 3 times. I kind of like what he's doing. Like recently, he went on patrol on a ride along in the middle of the night or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
In Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
To me, that was a stroke of genius. Genius is too much of a superlative, but it was a stroke of, I guess you could say, political wisdom.
Yeah.
Because he did an obvious thing that these fat donut eating politicians don't ever even think about doing. Getting into a freaking patrol car or whatever the hell he drew. It was in a tank or whatever the hell. But he went with the actual, first responding police units and was like, patrolling the streets. And I don't know if he was part of a conducting of any of the arrests or anything, but if I'm an average citizen and I vote for somebody who's claiming to want to protect me and my family and is about safety, right, and accountability to people that are committing crimes, what more obvious thing to do than to go on a ride along and make sure that those protocols are actually taking place on the streets at night?
Well,
so for the people that hate Trump, you can continue to hate him, but that's a really smart thing to do from a political, practical perspective. My point is this, though: the people that hate him, I was reading, are saying, "Oh, he's spending money doing the ride along, and there's congestion of traffic because give me a freaking break."
Yeah,
I mean, so the people that want to hate him will tune into those channels where the people that being critical of his ride along are saying the things that are critical of the ride along and not paying attention to, he actually did kind of a smart thing by checking out the protocols that are supposed to provide safety at night in the criminal-oriented zones of Washington, D.C. So you can tune in to whatever perspective you want, depending on whether you like a political donut eater or you can't stand the political donut eater.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Again, going back to the authentic is one part. But I think that one of the things that's important is that this is actually, because that's how he managed, right, in his business. The old adage that we learn in business is that you inspect what you expect, right? I mean, that's really one of the really important part of management.
What you expect. Absolutely.
And so because of that, I think that because his background is as a chief executive, he understands that on that level.
Yeah,
when you think about all the people that become, and this is one of the downside and the problem with government that we have, okay? Meaning that we anybody at any level, I mean, literally a homeless bum with no education. Again, I'm not knocking anybody who's in that situation for various reasons, okay? But let's say, has no education, can literally, if they were born here on the land, they could become president, okay? If they can get enough people to pick him, okay? And he's over 35 and all the other requirements that's there, okay? Now, of course, politically, he's not going to gain that type of advantage, and so obviously he's not going to get very far. But let's suppose that there's none of that. It's just a blind vote, right? You just have a name and their statement, name and their statement. That's it, and then you have to vote, right? He could be a clever guy and had this expression that he says, and then people like it and they vote, and all of a sudden they find out he's not.
We get that. So now he's in office. What's your point?
Well, it doesn't mean that he knows how to do anything.
I know, you're right.
That's my point. And so when you have a system of government, hold on. You have a system of government where your leadership can be put in with no experience and knowledge. Again, there's a pros and cons to that, right? And so this is why, to me, going back to our governmental structure, okay? If you look at the way that the United States is structured, right, constitutionally, we actually have 3 forms of government in one. Okay, that's our system, which is why it's so unique to me. It's so unique and so different, and we shared that in a previous podcast, and you go watch it.
The one about the executive, legislative, and
the executive, legislative, and judicial, and they each have their own parameters, right, for requirement. Okay, it's not like you have to have a degree to become a president. Okay, you don't have to have a degree to become a senator or a congressman. I think you kind of have to have a degree or something, in terms of legal. You need to know legal in order to become a judiciary, because you got to at least know the law, even if you're not fair with the law.
But the one African American Supreme Court justice, I don't.
Oh, Clarence Thomas.
No, the lady. I don't know how well she is in law. That was an equity position. Let's be completely honest.
Kajani,
they wanted a black woman.
Well,
whatever.
Again, I don't.
But anyway, to your point,
I don't know.
To that point, I think what you're saying is you don't need to have acumen to command positions that actually are supposed to be experts in those fields. The other part of it too is when those people get elected. Look at Schumer, okay, that idiot senator from New York. Did you see the last year when he was supposedly grilling hamburgers and they were raw and he was putting cheese on the frickin' hamburgers? The photo opportunity. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The ridiculousness of him trying to pretend to be somebody that knows how to grill a hamburger. The point I'm making is this: he is so shielded from the rest of us that he probably hasn't cooked a meal in 1,000 years. That's why he looked ridiculous trying to even cook a cheeseburger. He doesn't drive his own car. You know that, right?
Yeah.
And he's surrounded with security. He's so far removed from the rest of us who have to pull weeds from our lawn or actually water our own plants, any of that. And I think that's part of the point you're making too. These people command power. They aggrandize the power and influence. They come to these positions of power politically, and they're so far removed from the policies that they endorse, espouse, and say that they're participating in, right?
Yep.
They don't have to live with their own policies.
That's
because they're so far removed from the very constituencies that they say they're fighting for, right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
All of them.
Now, I'm doing
Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah. So I just did a quick query here. Check this out.
While he's doing that, this is Inside Reality. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. This is Jimmy Tran. We're with you every week.
According to my little search, the background of the highest percentage, or the percentage of individuals in our U.S. Congress, 119 U.S. Congress. This is what Google, of course, you definitely want to double check this. Okay, you don't need to fact check. You can fact check it, whatever you want. But it says here, 31% of the House of Representative members are in the legal profession. They're lawyers, okay? And 47 of them hold a law degree, okay? And according to this, historically, this is the declining trend. Nearly 80% of Congress member in the mid-1900s or 19th centuries were lawyers, okay? But I think that today's lawyers are a little different than others. But
so what does that have to do with the hypocrisy of politics?
Because here's the thing, right? We all complain, and I'm going to say the obvious here, right? We all complain about how horrible lawyers are, right? Until we need one, right? That's what they say. But the point is, we all say that, how can you tell if the lawyer is lying to you? His lips are moving, right? Those are all the type of jokes that we talk about, when it comes to lawyer. And then we vote, and we literally elect lawyers to be in those positions to do the very job that, that we're saying that we want to trust that individual. That's the hypocrisy from but we need to turn that mirror to the public.
We participate in the lawyer myth because there's some attorneys here locally in the Albuquerque market, and I think they're in Nevada, California, Texas, whatever. And they're called, I won't say, but it rhymes with Erner and Ho.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're on ubiquitously 100 commercials a day.
Yeah.
And what they say is this: are you in a wreck? You need a check.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is, I don't care if it's your fault or not. If you're in an accident, we're going to get you some money.
Exactly.
So it's like they're removing our responsibility to conduct our driving in a responsible, accountable way, and to be vigilant while we're driving, whatever. But the first thing out of their stupid little fat little mouths are, if you're in a wreck, you get a whatever they say, check. They're removing culpability from the accident, the dynamic of the accident itself, and assuming that if whoever you is in a wreck, you automatically are entitled to compensation.
Yeah.
So while people say they can't stand lawyers, they actually end up loving lawyers
when you're on that side of the fence.
When you're on that side. But according to these two, I can't stand these guys.
Yeah, yeah.
They're taking away accountability from almost what they're basically saying is any wreck, you get a check.
Well, again, they leverage a system that allows them to be able to do certain things. Okay, that's just the game. So again, going back to that old thing that, I mentioned earlier about, when Trump said, oh, this system is rigged, right? He was talking about, specifically he was talking about the whole tax system. It is rigged if you don't know where the rigging is.
A lot of you don't understand why Trump was so popular. And the reason he's loved is because people in Ohio have never seen somebody like him. That first debate, I'd never seen anything like it. I've never seen a white male billionaire screaming at the top of his lungs, this whole system is rigged. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama sitting over there looking at him like, no, it's not. And the moderator said, well, Mr. Trump, if in fact the system is rigged, what would be your evidence? He said, I know the system is rigged because I use it. I said, God damn. And then Hillary Clinton tried to punch him in the taxes. She said, this man doesn't pay his taxes. He shot right back. That makes me smart. And then he said, if you want me to pay my taxes, then change the tax code. But I know you won't, because your friends and your donors enjoy the same tax breaks that I do. And with that, my friends, a star was born.
Okay. And there are things that you cannot do because you don't have enough money to do it. Not just because you can't hire enough people with the knowledge, meaning that you're not even allowed to do it. Like an example, like you have to be an accredited investor, for instance, to invest in a certain type of investment that has some huge upside. Now, of course, the loss is pretty big too. So if you don't have the acumen and you don't have the background, whatever, then legally you cannot invest in that. And if you do, you get in trouble and stuff. So apparently there's all these things that are protecting. Now, they say this to protect the innocent, right? To protect the weak and to protect those that are vulnerable. But again, a lot of that is put in place to really protect their profits.
Yeah, I'm not
or
sure
whatever
what that
it is.
means. But getting back to what you're saying in that regard, look at Pelosi, okay? Nancy, one of the most evil yet clever political maneuverers that I've seen in my lifetime.
System. Yeah.
Look at the insider trading trading that was pretty obvious that she engaged in through her husband, making millions and millions and millions of dollars, because in Congress you're privileged to know certain kinds of information.
Yep, exactly.
You talk to your stockbroker about what company's going to fold or what company's going to be funded or whatever it might be, and you have an inside track on what stocks you could possibly invest in. There's another example of palpable, self-evident, overt hypocrisy. That she's made all the millions. She's beginning to say, oh, we probably should pass congressional legislation to prevent Congress people from engaging in inside trader information, when she's already made, treasure troves of, funding or monies engaging in that very behavior that now she says she's against.
Yeah, because it's politically expedient. That's really what it comes down to, whatever
That's
it is.
what we're talking about today. The frickin' donut-eating politicians. We don't pay attention. We don't hold them accountable. And they take such advantage of their positions and ultimately laugh at us, we the people. Because I can guarantee when they're having their little cocktail parties, Martha's Vineyard and all that, they're laughing at us, man. It. They're laughing at we the people because they got over on us. That's what's just infuriating to me.
Yeah. Here's another fact about the background of our political leadership in the Congress, particularly, right? 70% in the House and 82% in the Senate were elected officials. Now, I don't know if that's their only profession in their background, meaning that according to this, it says that.
So you're saying they're career political politicians, yeah. Well, look at Biden. He never had a
50
job
years.
in his life.
Yeah,
50 years.
More than half of his life.
Boy, that didn't go over too well. His presidency is going to be laughable. Just as a side note, now that we've seen the patheticness of not only his physical and mental state, but just his presidency. He's going to go down as one of the worst presidents of the last 100 years. Even you'd have to agree with that. I'm a reluctant Republican. You're an independent, but would you have to agree he's going to go down as one of the worst presidents of the last 100 years?
But yeah, definitely he's in the top 5, I think.
Yeah.
If not the top 1.
Awful.
There's so much going on, and this is why it's very interesting when you start to break some of this stuff down to its very pieces, right? You can kind of see some of these things. Now, of course, like I said, we can see things because things tend to perpetuate in our modern society and our modern, with the technology and all that. Okay. So literally, 30 years from now isn't that far away. And certainly with what, they're talking about, like if we had a Neuralink in our brain, right? Literally in an instant, we would know about what's going on in the world. We don't even have to go on the internet to look for it, right? That's really where some of these people are trying to drive us towards, right? In terms of the technology and the innovation. Now, my question is, what is that going to do? There's a way, I don't know if it'd be kind of cool and some advantages if we can read each other's thought, right? But I don't know if we can survive as a society, as humanity, if we have
I'm not
the
sure what
ability
that
to be
has
able
to
to
do with
do
the
that.
hypocrisy of politics. That's what we're talking about today.
Well, I mean, the argument there is, okay, well, if we can know clearly what the other person's thinking, then there's no way to hide. So hypocrisy would be driven out, if you will, the system. Right? I mean, that would be one selling point. All of us, so let's say here that we have a policy that's in place, right? We pass a law that says everyone that becomes a politician has to now hook up to their brain has to be wired in.
I don't like discussing hypotheticals. I just think
this is plausible.
I'm not
the
sure
technology is plausible to be able to do that. Now, the question is whether we will actually entertain that type of practice is a different story. But I'm just...
I'd rather discuss the hypocrisy of politics, like the embarrassment that was the Biden administration. Sure. I think one of the biggest scandals really in the last 100 years, probably surpassing, eclipsing Watergate, is the cover-up of the Biden incompetency, his mental acuity, just in some of the things that some of the inner circle, they're beginning to reveal. I mean, the guy, he couldn't pay attention. He wouldn't talk about, topics that were esoteric and complex. His actual work schedule was very much abbreviated throughout the day.
So here's the question. So we have this thing called the 25th Amendment, right? Yeah. So what is the 25th Amendment? The 25th Amendment
to hold is the acumen and the acuity of a president, to keep them accountable to that acuity, to that competency, to the standard of competency.
Yeah, if the president cannot perform the function of his or her role, right?
Standard of competency is what I just said.
The vice president needs. So that raises the. So if Kamala, so let's look at it from that side, right? So if Kamala actually knew about this and did nothing in terms of, or not allowed to do anything, right? So that means that these individuals are violating the Constitution from that standpoint, right there on that level. Okay, so that's one part. Now, there's a number of reasons maybe why they would or wouldn't want to do that, but the question is when and where and how this all were allowed to happen, because they were auto penning and that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's another whole topic.
Obviously, the only person that really is the president that can auto pen or sign something, right? That's how the law works. And of course, he has to be, from the law, my understanding that the president has to be the one directing an individual to sign, meaning that they have to be aware of the action.
But clearly under the Biden administration, it's obvious
that didn't happen. Yeah.
It did not happen.
Yeah.
There's no way around this. There were so many official documents and policies signed off by the president that he was not aware of, because he was clearly manipulated. Kind of like Woodrow Wilson, last, I think, year of his presidency, his wife, I think her name was Olivia.
Yep.
She was basically the president of the country.
All right.
As for Kamala not calling out the incompetency of Biden, I think she didn't do it because she's not a leader. I don't think she's ethical. I don't think she's particularly moral. She probably thought by doing this, she would undermine the chances of her.
No, she would have been president.
I think she wanted to be president for a full 8 years after the Biden administration concluded. And I think that's what she was opting for. But the bigger culprit, here's the bigger culprit than the loser politicians, including Kamala, the inner circle around Biden, and all the people that worked for the administration. They were all culpable in the scandal of protecting his mental incompetency. But the bigger culprit was most of the mass media that protected him.
They played
the CBSs of the world, the ABCs, the NBCs, the CNBCs, the CNNs. They protected him because they hated Trump so much. Well, that to me is the bigger scandal. And the third culprit that I hold accountable is we the people.
Yeah,
we didn't call out.
We didn't demand for it.
What we saw.
Yeah.
When he was falling down the stairs, falling asleep, not being able to conduct a lucid conversation when confronted with a challenge of an esoteric topic. And he actually put our country in absolute jeopardy, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And look at the 20 million people that came over the southern border, and we're starting to see these manifestations of crime because of just the incompetency that was the Biden administration.
Yeah.
I think it's an embarrassment and a stain on our country.
Well, I think it's much more than that too.
Mass media didn't call out Biden. And that's the biggest scandal that I've recognized in my lifetime, bigger than Watergate by far.
Oh, by far. I mean, at least with Watergate, it was relegated to just this one.
It was an isolated incident and then a cover-up.
Yep. And that was
a cover-up.
But yeah.
And Nixon had to resign, so there was an accountability to that.
Correct.
In the final analysis.
Yeah. There
was a consequence. Nixon did not conclude the last, 2 or 3 years, or what was it?
Of his term, yeah.
The last 2 years, because he resigned in August of 74, as I recall.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but yeah.
It's August of 74. I have a fantastic memory.
Iron Trap brain, right?
Inside reality.
All right. So
got about 10 minutes.
Actually that raises, so you raise a very interesting question. We have about 10 minutes or less to go. You raise an interesting question here in terms of that, like, okay, accountability, right? I mean, so we have laws, right? And if you violate certain laws, there's consequences, right? I mean, there's a thing called treason, there's a thing called sedition and so forth and so on. And of course, insurrection and all that. I mean, obviously some of that is intent. Some of that is you have to prove intent. You got to prove all, motive, opportunity, all that kind of stuff has to be part of this whole mechanism.
Motive, opportunity.
Yeah. So how would we go about holding, I mean, you say holding accountability, but I don't think there is even, like, for instance, even when the case of Nixon, there was no legislation. There was nothing that allowed for resignment, right, by a president. There was no option for that. Literally, that was created and invented in order.
That's not true. The Senate came to him, Nixon that is, and said, not only are you going to be impeached, but you're going to be thrown out of office. So that was almost like an ultimatum.
Sure.
Because because I've read this stuff in detail. The Senate came to him, Congress had already impeached him and said, we've got 97 votes to basically say you're done.
Indict him.
To indict
convict,
because Senate actually is the trial. That's the trial. Congress indicts, and then the Senate is that's the trial.
Correct. Yeah.
So he wanted to save face by being the first president to actually be, thrown out of office officially by Senate, by Congress, by this machine called our government, right? So he resigned.
Well, I think Andrew Johnson was impeached
but he was not
convicted. No, he was kicked out of office too. Anyway, we can look it up. But
that was right after Lincoln. I know that was after Lincoln. He was impeached. Well, Clinton was impeached as well.
No impeachment.
But what I'm saying to you is Nixon wanted to save absolute embarrassment and abashment. Because he resigned. And I'm not sure if it was Kissinger or who it was that said, listen, Mr. President, 97 votes against you, whatever the number was.
Sure. Yeah.
The best thing to do is resign. You can save, you could leave with some dignity, a little bit of dignity, other than, the gavel coming down saying President Nixon is officially, being excommunicated from office.
Yeah.
Right? So while you say there wasn't a president
Andrew Johnson
resigning,
was impeached. But was acquitted by the Senate by one vote.
Yeah, see, he was acquitted. So I knew he wasn't thrown out of office.
Bill Clinton,
but anyway, coming back to the
Nixon.
hypocrisy of politics, we've got about 5 minutes. Sometimes the media has basically married itself to a political candidate to protect that candidate from the scourge of embarrassment or scandal or revealing corruption.
Yeah.
Right? I think we started the show with that, concluding the show with that.
Now, here's an interesting too. You brought up Woodrow Wilson. What was interesting is that at the end of his, I mean, if I remember correctly, in the terms of the timeline and everything, right? What did we get? Because he was not fully competent there. Okay, we got
the League of Nations.
The Federal. Well, we got the Federal Reserve.
League of Nations for one thing.
Yeah, but we also have the Federal Reserve, which on his deathbed, he actually, if I remember correctly, was very regretful that he had allowed that to, because that was actually something that was by the cover of night. I mean, literally during the recess of holiday recess in December, just snuck in there and got it shoehorned in so that we got,
right.
and of course that led to the income tax that was then put into place.
You just said something really interesting. We should have spent more time on this. Jeffrey Candelaria, Jimmy Tran, this is Inside Reality today, the hypocrisy of politics. Look at an omnibus bill. Ask the average dumbbell American what an omnibus bill is. I'm telling you, where there's 350 million Americans, what do you think the percentage of the average American knowing what an omnibus bill is? 20%, 10%, 5%? I'd say it's 5%. I'd say 5% of the average person knows what an omnibus bill is. A bill that's so
everything under the
large that there's like a theme around the bill. Like Biden lied to us with the stupid anti-inflation bill.
Yep.
It was not about fighting inflation. There was so much tucked into it. I mean, sometimes these bills are 1,000 pages, 700 pages, 64 pages, that even Congress themselves, they will tell you, I didn't read the whole thing.
Of course not.
And do people realize that Congress votes on bills they don't even read? That's part of also a hypocrisy of Congress, that they're fighting for the people that they say they're representing.
Yeah.
That's a whole different problem that's why I think this country, it's doomed, because electoral college, I mean, I have issues with that. Mob rule, democracy, omnibus bills, gerrymandering, the census, perpetual politicians. I mean, all this stuff. It's the Supreme Court now actually becoming an instrument to create policy instead of being an interpretive body.
Yeah.
All of this stuff, man. But the biggest problem, we the people are not paying attention and are not holding these fat donut eaters accountable. It's our fault. That's why we're doomed. We're going to be a socialist country, and I think we'll ultimately be taken over by China.
Yeah, or some other...
By your people, the Chinese.
I don't know. Anyway, it's definitely an interesting condition we're in.
2 minutes.
This is part of the weakness of, again, a democratic system. When you have ill-informed or misinformed individuals in public.
Or lazy ignorant people that just aren't interested.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. They're not interested. The people are not interested. We, the people, are not interested.
No, there's a
aloofness, indifference.
Yeah. I mean, there's a saying, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, says, if you want liberty, and security, you can't have both. You can only have one or the other. If you give up one, you're going to lose the other, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now. We're at that stage that we have to decide as a public, as an individual,
I think
as
we've
a family,
as people are more interested in some stupid TikTok video of somebody doing a somersault with a chimpanzee than holding Nancy Pelosi accountable because she absconded with millions of dollars through inside trading, as an example.
Well, we definitely have a bigger population of individuals that kind of, you could say, are willing to allow that to happen, because they just don't care.
Pop culture destroyed the United States.
At some point,
the fascination with pop culture.
Yeah.
That's it.
You've seen the movie Red Dawn? Have you seen the movie Red Dawn, the original one with Patrick Swayze, and then the more recent
Never
one?
liked Patrick Swayze. No.
Okay.
I'm aware of what happened. Russians took over or something?
Well, actually, it was interesting because in the new version, the old version was Russia because they were the Soviet Union and all that. But in the new version, it was actually North Korea and China, because very interesting kind of breakdown of it. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when you have people inside that are not, and I'm not saying that they're Chinese or North Korean and everything. I'm just saying that, just as a general, that's how a whole society collapses.
I find it interesting that you, Jimmy, you make a point and then you retract the point. Like, if you want to make a point, just say it, man.
I didn't make a point.
Got a point. We've got to, by the way, we got 30 seconds here. How do you want to close the show? It's up to you. Inside Reality.
Well, I don't think that we're doomed in the same way. I think that we are. There are going to be factions and going to be segments of society that will probably survive. Kind of like if you look at the Roman Empire, right? We went from the Roman Republic into the Empire, and then of course the Empire then dissolved into the Byzantine and Empire and the Holy Roman Empire and all that stuff, right? So we're seeing something similar that's happening here in the United States. Somebody does a better job can break down kind of the various levels of decline that we're experiencing as well. Every if you look at historically, this is why democracies don't work. This is my understanding of reading things from our founding fathers, and that is that they recognize it, which is why they put into place mechanisms to try to address these concerns. Now, unfortunately, we got
why
so
don't
smart,
democracies work?
because at some point when you get enough people to decide that they want the fat donut eating,
So what happens is,
you know,
democracies don't work because ultimately the population becomes lazy, distracted, ignorant,
and all of the above,
wanting the machine called their government to provide.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's what I said at the outset. The democracy ends up cannibalizing itself with laziness, with sloth, and with non-production.
Because
and that's why we're doomed.
Because if you feed them, I mean, we've seen this even in animal studies, where if you keep feeding them, at some point they just disappear, they die, they become extinct.
Yeah, we're doomed. Because, as I said, you got propellers and you got anchors. All democracies turn into anchors, not propellers.
Not necessarily. If again, it goes back to where we've placed the incentives and where we place the mechanism.
Concluding the show. So
all right,
conclude the show.
Point. All right, my point is that
democracies don't work. Thank you for making my point. We'll see you next week.
I'll give you that on the first level, but there's more to it than that, and we can talk about that next time.
Democracies don't work. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria.
That's why we're not a democracy. Aha! See, like I said, we are a controlled monarchy. If you really want to really break it down,
we're a quasi republic.
Yeah, we're a republic of
representative government.
Yeah.
Still, the people that ultimately are the fuel for the machine.
Yes.
Ultimately, the fuel itself becomes extinct and it exhausts itself
unless it resets.
Produce. Okay, we're not gonna reset. Not gonna happen. Democracies don't work. Only on Inside Reality. We'll see you next week.
It does work if we reset. And the way we reset is either hard reset, where it just collapses and then we start over, or we do it internally. And that's kind of how it looks like.
Doesn't happen.
Anyway, I'll see you later.
We're doomed. Enjoy whatever little republic we have. Bye.